The Edifice Complex podcast is brought to you by DCM, the Drawing Specialists, Blue Rhythm Commissioning Software, and Sensor Suite, the future of intelligent buildings.
Welcome to the Edifice Complex, the property design and development podcast. Let your hosts Adam Muggleton and Robert Bean keep you up with who is innovating and doing great work, perspective on the adjacent possible, and challenges to the status quo.
Welcome to the Edifice Complex. I'm Robert Bean, your co-host and unofficial mediator, here with my colleague, official agitator, friend, and Yoda of most everything to do with buildings, Mr. Adam Muggleton. Say hello, Sir Yoda.
Hello, Yoda. So, yeah, interesting one today.
Yeah, our guest today is, our guest from today is from Hollywood, but not that Hollywood. Hollywood, England. Spent his early days studying law, English, math, and economics, and most recently spent some time through the London School of Economics and Political Science. But believe us, he's actually an interesting chap. So who graduates from economics and actually has a personality, right? Well, but Paul does. He's a diverse thinker, having looked at how mindsets can help unlock problem spaces and identify sustainable human-centered outcomes, and just released his first book, Even If It Was Free. I love that title. Welcome to the show, Paul Russell.
Thank you, guys. Welcome. I love being here. It looks good. I'm excited.
Paul, in your bio, you talk about using an open approach to participatory activities, basically used on design thinking philosophy, which we love that. We're interested in your journey that molded your philosophies. Tell us more.
Okay, I didn't used to think like that. I think my background was very much, I like to work out how things worked and how they broke. My father was an electrician, so probably from childhood, I like to tinker with things and figure out why they're not working and how to make them work. So that probably kind of set the scene for me. But then I just went into technology and really drank the Kool-Aid about technology was amazing. The wow factor would just transform people's lives without really bothering whether it did or not. I was sucked into that whole sales motion about this is amazing, you should buy our products and let's just crack on and make a load of money. And I was in that world for many, many years with different companies. And then the reason for the book, the reason for the book, was really because I had an event with someone who really made me rethink everything I thought about the conversation between two people when they were looking to buy or sell something. And in this case, it happened to be technology, but that really led me into buildings, infrastructure, and then all the way up to what smart cities might be or what they might not be. And it really was this curiosity factor that went all the way back to us all when we're children that probably gets stripped away, if we're honest, when we go into corporate land.
Yeah.
Because we probably don't realize it, but it just gets stripped away because we have to conform. And I don't mean that in a terrible way, but literally we have to play the game to get the job. And, even though we might still think we've got great, diverse mindsets and approaches, the risk of groupthink and bias really does affect us. And when we're talking about what we're thinking about, buildings and how people behave and how we live and how we work, bias is self-evident everywhere you look. And so you wonder, why is that? And even if it was all free, why would someone say they don't want it? Which is really the essence of the book. And so, I kind of got to all the way through my career, different places, carrying this with me all the way through till eventually I thought, I've had enough of corporate life. Let's go and write this book, finally get it done, and then really help people explore what I call a divergence mindset, which we all have, but kind of gets pushed to the back because of this convergence on getting things done faster, smarter, better. And we take a risk that we might not have understood the problem, nor the person that's got that problem. And, designing an airport or designing a hospital or whatever it might be, have we suffered from groupthink and bias and missed something?
Yeah. I'm so triggered right now. So you just
is that enough to start off with?
So the reason the reason I got in touch with you and we set this up was a couple of things. One, you talk about smart buildings. We'll come on to that. And two, the title of your book, even if it was free. The essence is, and I'll let you tell the story in a minute. I wouldn't take this even if you gave it to me for free. Now, I've been trying to sell commissioning management in North America at various parts of my career. Couldn't give it away. It was like giving away leprosy, right? There are some things that people just won't get on board with. And this whole, you're talking about like solutions, right? So you think about it. Really, every airport that's being built now is a copy and stamp, right? Copy, repeat, copy, repeat. A hospital, copy, repeat. And there's reasons for that because it works, blah, blah, blah. But there's no interrogation about like what's working, what do the users really want. This is one of my issues with buildings, right? We're not really designing for the users. We're designing for the developers. It's a financial product, not an actual product in a way. Anyway, so this is why I'm triggered. I'm all like already jumping all over the place like a crazy person. So can we start with the book, right?
Yeah.
That title, chef's kiss on the title, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So give us the story behind the title.
Okay, cool. So I think it might be 12 years ago. I worked in the tech sector. We were doing the day job, which is to sell stuff. We'd gone for a bid and we'd won the bid. And it was for a construction company, and we were good. Champagne was on ice. Bells had been rung in the headquarters, and we were, flavor of the month. And all we had to do on that day was go and get the contract signed. And we had Microsoft with us as well. So we were kind of tooled up with some good people. Went to get it signed, met the CIO, Chief Information Officer, the guy, and he didn't sign it. In fact, he scrawled out the millions of pounds worth of value and placed it with a zero and said, even if this was free, I don't want it. And I can remember the incredulous look on the face of the Microsoft guys who just thought this guy was a complete loon tune and, completely off the wall. And I just thought, well, I don't know him that well, but I can't imagine he got this job without knowing what he's talking about. So why has he said that? So that triggered me. I mean, that without a doubt, that triggered me in my career because it made me think, wonder why he said it. And over time, I now know why, I think, which is hence the book. But it really was a wake-up moment to say, have we missed something? And really that moment took me out of my comfort zone in the technology career and went into construction. And the other book, which I'm showing over here, just there, How Buildings Learn, was the first book that he told me to look at. And in my book, I call him Free Guy, but he actually is on the back of my book, and he's a great friend of mine. And he asked me to read that book about How Buildings Learn by Stuart Brand. And it's a fantastic learning for me about the pace of change. And to your point, Adam, about buildings we design without really thinking about the people, the occupants. It's more about conforming to a standard and everything else. And we'll always argue that's because we don't know who's going to be using the building and things will change. But what Brand talks about is when you understand these layers of pace, slow versus fast, you kind of get a better understanding of what you're trying to do. And what Brand talks about, which really, when I read it, I thought, oh my God, have we just missed the point? He talks about look around at other things, fashion, nature, all operates at these different pace layers. And we kind of accept it or we don't, but at least you understand it. I mean, climate change is a perfect example now about our inability to understand the layers of pace. And so what Mark was saying to me was, look at it when you talk about technology making a building smart, because if you don't, you'll fail. And really, that got me going. And that got me into all of the industries who purport to provide smart into the building world. And it's fascinating. And there's some great success stories, but there's also some train crashes in terms of the failure to understand the pace. And it's people. The only thing is how people behave. And really, do we spend enough time thinking about it? Or do we just assume, well, yeah, I've flown from a few airports in my time, so I probably know how an airport's going to work. Or, I've been in hospital, so I probably know how that's going to operate. And actually taking a bit of time to just think about, have we understood the problem enough? And that's why I wrote the book.
Time. So this is the thing, right? There is the competing sort of like massive forces when you do a project. Time being one of them, right? So it's like when you're first in a project, everyone's thinking about it's all like hurry up, and then it's really going on. Then all of a sudden, someone goes, right, I'm committing the money, and then the time pressure just comes in like a tsunami, right? And it's like, when am I get that rent roll going, get the money going, and there's no room at that point, right, for considering process. What you're talking about here is processes and people. I worked on a large P3 job at design phase, and the design team, because it was a P3 and they didn't want to screw up and they were actually on the line for how it worked, they did process models of like, how do you get a patient from this room to this room in the shortest possible time? And it actually worked, but it meant you weren't doing a generic hospital design at that point, right? This was a CHUM in Montreal. It was really interesting watching it done. But I thought, okay, that was great on that job, but I've never seen that done since. So in the 40 years I've been working, I've seen that done once.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, in the book I talk about, there's a wonderful little story that which really taught me, I suppose the essence of what I'm writing about is that everything that we take for granted and we love and we spend money on, I call a trilogy of temptation, which sounds quite mysterious, but really it means that, you know, we're innovating like on a pace we've never done before, and you know that's good. You know, that's absolutely as it should be. That's a human thing that we do. That's why we innovate and donkeys don't. You know, I guess, but maybe they do. But I've never spoke to a donkey, so I don't know.
That's the strap line for this episode. We innovate, donkeys don't. Thank you.
You can have some fun with that, right? So the first leg of the trilogy is innovation, and you know we thirst for that, and it's amazing. The second leg of the trilogy is that with this innovation we get confidence to do things we've never done before, confidence to try things we've never done before. That whole agile culture that we've kind of lived and breathed with. So that's the second leg of the trilogy, and the third and final leg is the fact that allows us to go faster. And so, because we believe fight or flight, so therefore we need to go faster. So the three added together creates a situation where we'll try and build things faster, smarter, better. We'll try and pump it full of more and more innovation to make sure we're more comfortable, more safe. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that until it is. And there is something wrong with that. And that's when the other side of our human vulnerability appears. And I'll talk a lot in the book about bias and our assumption and our arrogance towards knowing the answer, and the fact that, you know, we'll solutionize things too quickly, and even when they don't work, we'll get wrapped in a sunken cost fallacy that say, well, it didn't work in that hospital or in that hotel, but that doesn't mean it won't work in the next one. You know, and I'm pointing towards artificial intelligence a little bit there, because we passionately believe, because of this trilogy, that fundamentally we're right. And we being, you know, industry generally, and anybody that kind of rocks up and says, okay, that might be true, but can we just reframe, gets kind of bashed down a little bit. Because when people say reframe, I think it's like a slow down message, and no one wants to slow down. You know, if I say to you guys, look, I like your point of view, but can we just spend a few minutes? Immediately, that's a red flag, which is this guy is going to slow us down, and we can't afford to slow down. We've got to get on. And I don't know, was it Einstein that said if I had an hour to save the planet, I'd spend 59 minutes thinking about how to do it and a minute doing it?
Yeah.
Allegedly, he said that. And you kind of think, yeah, people don't like that. But if they're honest, they probably could take advantage of that. I mean, I don't know if you guys have heard the story. You must have, the Berlin airport story.
Oh, what, the new Berlin airport, you mean?
Yeah, the new Berlin airport story.
I know it's an unmitigated disaster.
Unmitigated disaster. But I only read what I've seen. But if you look at it, it has all the hallmarks of trilogy of temptation. Yeah. Let's build the biggest, you know, the smartest airport in Germany to service, you know, Europe like can never be done before. But because the architect had a bias against shopping malls, you know, things like shopping malls were excluded. And then by the time they got through with all the myriad of problems, planes had changed in size, travel patterns had changed, more shorter journeys. And then we get a pandemic. And I think it only opened like last year, 11, 12 years later. And you kind of think these are all very, very smart people, very clever people, but something had happened, and it's just unpacking that, which is nothing earth-shatteringly new. But it does come back to, I think, our admission of frailty and how we tell each other stories. So I want to tell you this very, very quick story, but it's in the book, and I know the words really well. It's 3 a.m. in the morning in Singapore. Our colleague has lost experience. Tell us how you're going to restore it. That was it. Now, my world and the built world is very governance driven. It's very checks and balances. There is no wriggle room for imagination usually. You know, the architects maybe, but the whole process is very well drawn down. And this is from a bank. This is all they said. They didn't send anything else. And when you read that statement, it was a story. It was a story that had a protagonist, had the colleague. They'd lost something. It's 3 a.m. in the morning in Singapore. Immediately when we read this, it got our mind thinking, what the hell is going on in Singapore at 3 a.m. in the morning? What have they lost? When will they get it back? What is it they've lost? What's the impact? Is it going to get worse? Suddenly your mind starts to open up. And as your mind opens up, a lot of new questions appear. Well, what if we tried that? What if we tried that? And we responded to this bid in that way, and we won it. And the VP of the procurement rang me and said, the reason you've won that is because you're the only one that immediately said, can we speak to someone in Singapore at 3 a.m. in the morning? Because we want to be in their shoes to feel what it's like for them to lose their experience. Whereas all the other competitors just sent the bog standard stuff or didn't bother replying. And she said, it's my frustration. It's my frustration with the industry, the process, the governance, that there is no room left for a little bit of curiosity in the conversation. And that small example, I think, echoes everywhere, that we all know we could do it, but we're just so scared that, we don't know what will happen if we do it. Well, do you know what happens when you do it? You find a better answer.
I love this conversation. It's like Stephen Covey meets David Kelly, the CEO of IDEO, meets Freud, meets Maslow, meets Virginia Satir.
Okay.
Right?
Meets the Brummie guy from Birmingham in the UK.
But curiosity and creativity are different sides of the same coin, right? If you're crushing curiosity, you're crushing creativity ultimately. Am I right?
Well, I think you are. And I think the danger, and I've worked in industries that are hugely creative, is that we dress it up. We dress up curiosity and creativity, and we use phrases like, let's have a workshop where we'll think outside the box.
Oh, I hate that statement.
Don't get me going on that.
I'm going to stop. I have an image of a caricature trying to escape outside the box, and when that statement first hit the press, it was like, thinking is an activity, but it's not a physical doing. You can think all you like, but until you actually do something, nothing happens. But the problem is that as kids, everybody's told not to color outside the lines. We're taught as infants to stay within the box. Yeah. And then someone comes up with this slogan, think outside the box, and my brain imploded. And it hasn't recovered since.
Me neither. But then I will admit there were moments where I would go into these meetings thinking it was feasible that we were going to think outside the box. But I can probably count on one hand, if one finger maybe, where that genuinely happened. And a lot of it's because we're just scared. Leaders generally are scared of letting their staff. Google, I think, were renowned for their Friday thing where, if you worked at Google, the three of us could sit in a room one day, come up with an idea, and if they liked it, that would be our job for the future. And it completely open. It could be anything. It could be anything crazy you like. Even Google stopped that now because they've now got a top-down approach, which says we can only do that if it contributes to this. So already they're asking you to color between the lines, which maybe makes sense when you look at their competitive marketplace. So it's really hard to keep our minds open for too long. We get tired. We're tired. So when we go in these workshops that are innovative and creative, they're just not. And of course, and I've worked in this industry for sure, where the next problem we have is that we have these workshops and we stuff them with technology. I mean, I worked in Rico, where we would have smart whiteboards to make these meetings and these funky workshops even easier. It would just increase the frustration and reduce the creativity even more, because people spend most of their time trying to figure out how to use these products. And the creativity just sucked out of the room. So I think we've tried to make things smarter and smarter and smarter, and increasingly failed. Not because we're not trying the right thing, but because the trilogy of temptation gets us. And we need more people to say, I just think we could still think outside the box, but let's just not call it that. Because as soon as you call it that, the pressure's on to come up with ideas. And the job is just to come up with ideas full of post-it notes on the wall. And we think we've done it. When we've done that exercise, the truth is we all know that's not the exam question. The exam question is to come up with a really good idea that's sustainable.
I sometimes think those design workshops are just virtue signaling, so that you can get that image of all the post-it notes on the wall, and it's like ticking the box, done that era. But every design charrette and workshop I've been to, it goes like this. We all get in, everyone shakes hands, we have a coffee and a donut. We all have this group hug. We violently agree with each other for a day. And then, because it's every decision's based on first cost, we still go out and do what we did in the last job. It's a total and utter waste of a day, in my opinion.
But you wonder, I mean, I'm with you, but I'm also thinking, well, there must be some better ways. And I think a lot of it is because we just need to probably dust down our cognitive skill sets. So, for example, I think I maybe talked about this when I spoke to you before, Adam, about when was the last time we had a good idea? So, I've done some sessions recently with leadership teams, where we've run a good ideas audit, which sounds really posh, but all it is just to say to people, to take a minute, take a 5-minute break, go off in your corner. You're the chief marketing officer, or you're the chief sales officer, or chief head of engineering. Go in your own domain, because that's your area of expertise, and think back the last 12 months, and think back the last time you had a good idea, and then come back to the room.
Soul crushing.
And it is soul crushing. It's soul crushing because they can't do it. Yeah. Now, when you then reframe it and say, let's just park that. We'll get to that. You're struggling to find that. No problem. Now go and do it instead. Think about bad ideas. And there's a flood of bad ideas. So you think, this is really interesting. They're eager to tell you the bad ideas, but they're struggling to come up with the good ideas. So why is that happening in your business? Because this workshop that we're about to start is about innovating for the future. We're not going to have a successful workshop because you can't think of what a good idea looks like. And when you finally get them and you reframe and reframe, you then start to find out how they have good ideas. And then you kind of set the frame for your workshop, because then you've got who are the barriers, who are the blockers, things like that. And you've got an open, honest opportunity. And every time I've done it, it's always revealed something that everybody would have said at the start. No, we're so innovative. Our ideas are amazing. We're just on an acceleration. We just want more of the same. But if they're really honest, they struggle to find out what they were like.
Yeah. There's a lot of narcissists and psychopaths in our business, unfortunately. And all of them get up in the morning, look in the mirror and go, your ideas are just the best, Adam. You're awesome, And that's how they start their day, most of them. I know I do. It's hard.
It's interesting. The whole smart building thing, we find that, and again, groupthink is a killer, is that finding the person who's going to give you the answer to a question you hadn't thought to ask is probably your magic sauce. And I told you the example, I think, of the building in London.
Yeah, repeat that story. That was a great story, actually.
Yeah, and I was at IBM at the time, and we had artificial intelligence. So we had a right to talk about smart cities, smart buildings. IBM were one of the first tech companies to talk about smart cities way back when. So IBM were entitled to a seat at the table, which again, the way I even say that sounds crazy, but they were entitled to a seat at the table. And so this table was full of the architects, the M&E people, all of the project teams involved in this building, which is probably at the time, probably still is the tallest commercial block in London. And no, because that's restaurants, hotels as well. This was pure commercial. 67, 68 floors. Anyway, so the workshop was ostensibly to talk about tech, and there was an app, and there was a smart building app, and we can all probably work out what that would do. Organize your dry cleaning, book your gym membership, tell you what's on the menu. And the meeting was going fine, and they were looking at wireframes of the app, and it was all very much business as usual. It's all been done before, no creativity, really. And everyone was the same age. They were all white male in the room talking about this wonderful app. And in my curiosity stage, I was beginning to kind of get a bit tired of this myself. I noticed that the young woman who was in the room, ostensibly to take the notes, was completely bored. And I know that because I've seen that look, and I hope she won't mind, but I've seen that look from my daughter when I've been talking about things. So I recognise the sign. So I probably rudely interrupted her because she was not paying attention. And I said to her, what do you think to this app? Because you're more likely to work in this building than we are. And she looked at it and she said, well, if you made me use it, I suppose I'd have to, but I wouldn't use it. And I said, well, why wouldn't you use it? She said, well, it doesn't do anything for me. And I said, that's really strange. Why would you say that? She said, well, the apps that matter to me are the apps that I've already got on my phone that I already use to engage with my friends, and they're going to get me around London, find me train times and bus stops. And so when I said to her, well, if you could use that app in this building, what would you think? Should I be all over it? And the guy who's designing the app, who'd spent £1 million already, I think, on the app, just looked crestfallen. And I remember saying to him, what? I just think we've just been talking to the wrong people. Yeah. And he said, yeah, but I've just been talking to the same people I always have been talking to. Real admission of, yeah, you're right. I haven't been talking to her. Yeah. And I think, finding the person that has the problem is job 2. Job 1 is, what is the problem? And we skim those 2 questions, and we like to jump straight to, we've got the answer. We don't need to know what the problem is. We've got the answer. Ergo Berlin Airport.
Biases are strong, and applies not only to the building industry, but it applies to other companies, but also applies to industries. And one particular industry that I participate in has probably spent annually close to probably $6 million a year on trade shows. And so let's just say, over 10 years, that's $60 million that they've spent collectively as an industry to try to change market perception of the industry with no changes. Right. So if you were in charge of a corporation, and the marketing, public relations, sales team spent $60 million without any changes, how long would you keep those people on staff? Right. That's you'd be done. And so, but these biases tell them that, every year we need to have a trade show, and we need to sell booths, and we need to sell advertising, and we need to have all the bling and bring in customers, and we need to do that because that's what we've always done. Without creating change.
We've always done it that way, bias. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a dangerous place to be, because it creeps up on you.
Well, I think the dangerous, and I kind of think I know why that might be, because of the word pivot. Because I think
that's going to show on buzzwords.
Because you've got a word pivot.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this project is going wrong. We'll pivot. And it's just the sheer, the kind of, as soon as someone hears the word pivot, it's like, oh, we're okay now then. We're going to save face. We'll save money. We'll succeed because we've pivoted. And, and every time that we used to do it in my industry, in the tech industry, you would just say, oh, we pivoted. And you think, okay, that makes sense on an email or a broadcast, but what does that really mean? And I've kind of come to the conclusion that it's just it's a catchphrase, like think outside the box, these kind of words that we use, because it's signaling to the other person in this conversation. And it's signaling, and it's a successful signal most of the time, because we know we're waiting for those type of words to give us comfort and assurance that, hey guys, this project's going wrong, but we're pivoting now, so we're okay. And it's that kind of safety signal, I think, that we look for. And I just often wonder, it's just laziness of our brains, not of the human being, of our brains, to say, do you know what? I've got so much going on. Pivoting is fine because that gives me a chance to, make some sense of my day. And the only time I've seen pivot work, and I can't claim nothing to this, was during the pandemic. Was one of the NFL teams had an app, and the app was for at-seat food and beverage during the game. Pandemic, no games. They pivoted the app and turned it to help the homeless queuing at food banks. And they used the app to allow them to book their food delivery rather than queue up to get their food. And they used the app's architecture to pivot and change the way it worked. And it was a successful pivot because it made a real difference to a human outcome. And so I always use that story when people say the word pivot and then say, okay, that's a pivot. What are you talking about is just covering your backside. And that isn't going to be the same impact.
So a friend of mine used to play Project Bullshit Bingo. There were certain key words. And if you was in a meeting and four of them came out, he'd scream bingo halfway through the meeting. And pivot would be one of them words.
Yeah.
But it is amazing, though, because it all comes back to how we frame things. Yeah. And the simplest reframe can be the most powerful thing. And I urge anybody listening to this, we all can do this.
Yeah.
I had a workshop recently about fly tipping. I don't know if that resonates, Robert, for you, but Adam, you'll know this.
You need to describe that for our international audience, what fly tipping is.
So fly tipping is really where people have household waste, rubbish, and they could take it to a public refuse place to be disposed of, but they don't. They put it in their car or put it in their van, drive up around the roads and lanes near where we are, and dump it. They dump it illegally. It's horrendous. It's one of the worst social things that you could think about, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. So we call it fly tipping. And we ran this kind of workshop where we asked people to reframe. Why is that happening? What should we do? And we had the spectrum. We had some people going, we need more cameras, more surveillance. Let's catch them, let's arrest them, let's put them in jail. And then we had, to the other side, we had people going, well, who is the problem in this situation? Is it the person dumping the stuff? Is it the council, the local authority? And it kind of revealed that what has happened is because of the collection of this refuse has become so finite, so granular, so governance driven, people won't go. But when they won't go, they also realize that if I got a van and came to Paul's house and said, you know what, I'll do it for you, just give me $20 and I'll do it for you, I'll then dump it. So the person with the problem is the person with the van, because they're the people that are dumping the stuff largely. Yeah. So what if we could make their lives easier? And Toyota nailed this years and years ago in the car industry when they reframed one of their problem statements and said, how can we make your jobs easier? And so when you think about the building world and how we reframe what we're trying to achieve with airports and hospitals, how often do we have a moment in our thinking where we reframe what we think we're doing? Yeah. And often we don't. We go with what we've done before, and we push back anybody that attempts to reframe it because it might cost us something. And so we push it. If we could just not do that and have a moment to reframe, I think we'd find a reason like the fly tipping white van, and we might find the Toyota example in every example we work in.
I'm grinning because I'm reading one of Jack Welch's books, and he was addressing the sales and marketing team from the jet engine business, parts business. And all of the sales guys, GE sales guys that were selling GE replacement parts to the GE engine people were making a killing. Like they had almost obviously 100% market share, right?
Yeah.
So Jack reframed it. He said, you're not in the GE parts business, you're in the engine parts business. So now your commissions are not based on GE sales, but all part sales for all jet engines around the world. Over like a half a second, he diluted their commission base by reframing what was actually their business.
Yeah.
Totally.
Jack was a master at reframing, and people hated him for it, but that's how he made GE as strong as it was while he was at the helm.
Yeah, that's interesting. Also, sorry, Karen.
No, it's just like the other one that I always think about every time I get in a building is lifts, elevators.
Yeah.
You know, elevators went through a time when they were too slow. People complained, and that's because the buildings were getting higher. So, of course, we were complaining about, the elapsed time waiting for lifts. So when they looked at the problem originally, they one of the problem statements was, how do we make them 20% faster? Well, of course, that engineering-wise, that was probably very difficult to do without really making some significant cost impacts to the running of the building. But when they reframed it and changed it, how do we make people enjoy it, the experience more? They realized they could put mirrors in the lift, which is now why mirrors are in lifts. And that's because people can look at themselves, they can check their hair, they don't feel threatened, they don't worry about the lift falling down because they're preoccupied with what they can see. And then we have mirrors now in our lifts, and then we have cam music, and so all of these things were to try and reframe the problem, which is why one of the largest elevator lift manufacturers in the world, Kone, rebranded themselves and called themselves people flow specialists. They worked out, but they're no longer lift engineers, which sounds really boring.
Yeah.
They're people flow, and help people flow smoother, the experience. And it's all about this outcome-orientated world that when we're in the built environments, the outcome is not the one that's got the human being attached to it. The outcome is hitting target, avoiding fines, penalties, stuff like that, and built against a generic, avatar of there's going to be someone using this airport. And of course, that has to be the case. But more and more people now are starting with the outcome-orientated observation first, working the other way.
That's really interesting. A good segue into what I want to talk about next, because that fly tipping thing was a great example of unintended consequences. You start off with a genuine need to do something good, and you wind up with an unintended consequence. And and then the Kone example of and elevators now have screens in, right? People sit there and watch things like that, a new smartphone. But we're moving into this brave new world of smart buildings, right? The potential here to be impacted by all the things we're talking about here, the lack of thinking of people, the lack of thinking about users, the unintended misapplication of technology, the potential for this to be horrible is just huge. I mean, there was an example in Toronto where Toronto is a really strangely developed place. There's lots of undeveloped waterfront. So Google were going to come in and develop this Google place, and they wanted to have sensors everywhere. And in the end, it all got shot down because it was considered too much surveillance. So it didn't even get built because people weren't ready for I'm going to track you everywhere you go. Oh, you can be in the toilet twice a day. Do you think that's a bit much? So it didn't go anywhere. Now, that doesn't mean smart buildings aren't going anywhere, but how do you see the smart building market sort of evolving, considering all the things we've just been talking about?
Yeah, I remember reading about that Google story, and there are numerous examples. Too many to mention about the addition of the word "smart" is kind of creates problems in itself.
Like green,
and I think honestly, we just need to stop talking about that word and try and reframe our own language to just get away from that word because I think that word itself has creates has a bit of a blocker. Some people love it, a lot of people hate it, and a lot of people distrust it. And therefore we're not going to get the outcome we're looking for because we've created a blocker just by that language. So, I think a lot of it's down to the language we use, and without probably just thinking I can come up with the word, maybe there isn't a word. I think it does require a shift in thinking to. Well, I think the problem we need to overcome is people aren't the same, and as soon as we can get past that problem, then we can make, I think, human-centered designs that, will be sufficiently good enough. And I think that's the key, sufficiently good enough. Whereas what we were trying to do before was make it so much better and smarter than anything ever done before, that by doing that, it didn't help the people who just wanted good enough. And I think good enough is not a great strap line, I know, not as good as smart, I know, but
good enough building.
It's good. Yeah, good enough. This airport is good enough. Well, but the truth is, an airport that's good enough to get me on my plane on time is good enough, right? A smart airport that has delays and baggage issues and big queues for the coffee is just not good enough. And that kind of dumbing down of our language, I know, is impossible because we just love language and language and language. But I do think a little bit of humility in the process, but not just because it's a coy word to say. But I think there's a lot of great people out there who already insert this human-centered conversation during the process, not because they're trying to slow it down, but because they realize they want to make sure that the human involved in that conversation disrupts themselves enough to say, am I doing the right thing before I get too far down the line? And, God, we've got so much evidence to suggest we know this to be true. So why would we continue to perpetuate that problem? Yeah. And it then points down to culture, leadership, and it kind of gets kind of a bit big. And it therefore wouldn't be easily fixed, of course. But stop saying smart would be a good thing. But I Googled smart the other day, and it's just gone nuts. I didn't realize how many things are called smart now. Smart cat flaps were a thing I saw. You think, my God, I just want a cat flap. What is it? They can't build a better mousetrap, or you probably think you can build a better mousetrap? I don't know. But yeah.
What's a smart mousetrap? It kills the mouse and sends him a text. You're dead.
Well, I mean, I work with colleagues who were spending their time working on things like smart mousetraps and stuff, because everybody wants to try and have their moment in the limelight, which is kind of okay. But that brain power just could be put to a better place, I think.
The Edifice Complex will continue in just a moment.
Can you find the drawing and supporting documents you need in less than a minute? Now you can with Echo. It's simple. Just type what you're looking for and press enter. Echo knows your building. Speak with a drawing specialist today. Ask about our special offer of painless onboarding plus 6 months free with Echo. Visit podcast.thedsoffer.com. That's podcast.thedsoffer.com.
And now, back to the show.
Well, there's an evolutionary continuum on this stuff. I remember Professor Chris Peister was his name, and this is going back, oh man, I got to think like 20 years ago in the very beginnings of nanoparticles, and he developed this, or was in the early stage of developing nano dust. These were small, tiny nanosensors. And the idea is that you could actually embed these in paint in the walls and as a receiver. And so if people were wearing transmitters, the building would know, and if the transmitter had information about it. So who is the person, what's their age, what's their physical capabilities, do they have, psychological challenges, maybe they have, there could be mental illnesses, brain health issues, dementias, for example. So the building would actually know who the person is, where they are, what they need, and then using relays be able to direct these people back to their rooms or to wherever they needed to go. That was an ideal world back then. There was no limits to what you could think about, right? But in practice, we haven't been able to do it, and part of it is an economic challenge that we have. Millions of smart sensors don't come for free.
No.
Right? Yeah.
So I think that was a pre-social media era where the externalities of social media are becoming evident now. And that eventually would fold into the smart building equation, right? So, there's a thin line between a building that is, to use technology advanced enough to be awesome. There's a thin line between that and being completely creepy and being a surveillance prison, right? That line is way too thin. And it goes back to the story you told earlier about that young lady in your meeting, right? She was looking for a value add. Right, and nothing more. Right, she didn't need to know X, Y, and Z. She just wanted this, and this, and boom. So the way that this thing actually has to evolve is it has to focus on her, not what
absolutely
the developer thinks they want or what the government think they want. Right, and that's going to be the battlefield, I think, in the future. This line between surveillance and value add is going to go backwards and forwards.
Yeah,
well, it's interesting. I was on a thing yesterday about digital poverty. I'm an ambassador on this thing yesterday, and we were talking about if we have millions of people who are deemed to be digitally excluded, how can we do that? And there's a lot of people thinking and talking about, well, it's laptops, tablets. Let's get a supply chain. Let's distribute. Let's put people in place to support them, and all great things to do. But we had a great conversation about the problem is that people don't realize they're in that situation, and they only know they are when they want something. I need to speak to my bank, and they want to send me a text message with a code. I don't have a phone, or the bank has got a chat bot, and I don't know how to use that. Whatever that might be, and this fascinating thing about at that moment in time was when they needed a digital experience. And of course, they don't know when that's going to be, and we can't possibly advocate for that. And when you take that and move that into the smart building, and all the efforts we've done is to try and anticipate when people want or don't want to use the toilet, or want to use the smart whiteboard in the room, or want to use the restaurant. And what we're not able to do is capture the behavior or the analysis of what people want at that time. And we use sensors. I think traditionally, we just kind of track them and we kind of see, why do they do that? Why do they go over there? And, that sort of huge industry looking at those sort of things. And the only thing I can think of is that if you were suddenly on this call with Amazon, or let's just take Amazon for a minute, and said to Amazon, would you like to take over the smart building industry? They'd probably have a good crack at it. Because the one thing that they understand is people's behavior. Because they can influence that behavior, rightly or wrongly. They can influence behavior. So they have a mindset about behavior. The majority of the other people who are providing the tech don't. They have their own mindset built on engineering and deep learning of building systems, of course. But that might give them an assumption that they also know about human behavior. Well, I mean, why did Keynote change their company strapline? Because they realized they need to be behavioral specialists, not just engineers. So Amazon would probably have a crack at it if they wanted to. And you know what? They probably could, because the one thing they do know is at that moment in time, someone wants to do something, order something, get it delivered. And that's really all the building is doing. I need to queue for something. I need to go somewhere. That's what we do in buildings. So I think there's a lot of it to be done. Now, if that's smart, brilliant. Let's vote for that, right? And I don't see a lot of that. I see some great attempts, but they can't scale. I mean, what is the building? I know the architect now, I can't remember his name, who did the building in Amsterdam, the Edge.
Right, yeah.
Smartest building on the planet. 50,000 sensors, amazing apps for everything. But how many of those do they build?
And also,
I worked for a time with facilities management companies, and they were looking after 25,000 buildings. And the strap line was, we're going to transition 25,000 buildings to be smart. Well, when I left that kind of scenario, I think they'd probably done, well, if any at all, if they've done less than 4, I'd be amazed. And I say that only because they've been flooded with technology. I wouldn't say they were smart. So it's scale as well. How do you get scale? Because we're talking about affordable homes. We're talking about social living. We're talking about, construction and driving, well-being for people on a scale that we've probably never seen before, where we will use automated process, offsite build, artificial intelligence, 3D print, all those amazing innovations. But when we're doing it, how do we also make sure that the outcome is whatever that word smart is? And I think we've got a long, long way to go there.
I think, on scale, it can only ever be Amazon, Google, Microsoft, maybe Apple, right? They're the only firms at the moment with the scale and the reach to do something like this.
Well, I think the smartphone is the I'm not going to say pivot. I think smartphone is the thing, because it's the thing we're closest to, which is back to the young woman.
Yeah,
the young woman was looking at that smart building purely through the lens of her smartphone, not through the lens of an app that she would have to download and use because she was told to. But she was looking through the lens of a smartphone that kind of ran her life. And, if she then could put the building in that lens, chances are she would be an advocate to collect data, and it wouldn't be surveillance anymore. Because to her, it'd be like, I'm just using it. If you want to use my data like Facebook is, I'm fine, because I see the end result. And I think that's the subtle shift we're going to have to go away from surveillance by making it something they want to do in the first place,
I think,
as opposed to something we're imposing on them, which of course means that people won't do it.
Yeah, sorry about that. Adam, we had Bill Browning on a while ago, and I don't know if you know who Bill Browning is, but he's a leader in biophilic design. And when I think of smart buildings, and Bill has a view of that like none other. And as an example, some of the concepts he works with is when people travel through spaces, like take, for example, stairwells. These are boring spaces, right? That are lit up for safety and have all of these, the fire protection, blah, blah, blah. But people use them. And so for him, these are spaces that we could draw people into and then become spaces for socializing. So they would put these digital boards on the landings. So when people went to use the stair, as soon as they opened up the door, the lights would come on, the screens would show trees and waterfalls. Like you can imagine a large screen and a large stairwell, these beautiful images, and people would collect there. And all of a sudden now the staircases that at one point were never used became places for ideas. People would meet in the hallways and they would spend time and talk. To me, that's a useful place for smart technology.
That's really interesting. The convergence of biophilic design with the technology.
Yeah.
Right? That something good could come out of that. But to the previous point you were making, Paul, I think the only way to make these buildings work with this level of technology is to anonymize people. So what I mean by that is the genius of all these tech firms is they make you identify yourself to do anything, right? I was in London the other month with my daughter, and she tried to get a haircut. She could not get a haircut booked without giving her email and her name and a phone number, right? So, whether you're a tinfoil hat person or not, she's in the system there, right? Now, that will be the resistance, I think, to a lot of smart buildings, right? That creepy person of interest type thing. So if you could somehow have that technology, but anonymize it so that, yes, we know 10 people are here and 20 people are there, but you don't know it's Sam, Paul, and Mark, right? That's going to be the way you're going to sell it en masse. But the problem with Amazon and Google and Apple and people like that is their business model is tied to identity.
For sure.
right? And that is the conundrum that's got to be unpicked there. That's
that's got to be unpicked. I agree with you, Adam. And I gave you the example yesterday. I think I was at one of these conferences where we were talking about, at the time, there was this similar to smart and pivot. One of the phrases was data is the new oil.
Bingo.
I think it was coined by one of the retailers. And again, you can see why, they'd use that phrase. And that really latched on. People talked about it all the time. Data is the new oil. And which is quite strange, because it seems we're trying to reduce the consumption of oil, but data's going the other way. But I was at this conference and this was all coming out. And this guy next to me, I think he worked for Bloomberg. And, we're talking about smart buildings and IoT and big data and algorithms and machine learning and deep learning. And he said to me, what's the problem? What are you guys worried about? What's going on? What's this problem about data? And I said to him, offline, I said, well, one of the problems is ownership. The supply chain is so disparate. The life cycle is involved, this contracts, all that kind of governance. And therefore, no one wants to own it. Therefore, no one wants to trust it. No one, blah, 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 blah. And carried on and gone. And he said, you know what? How much data would you sell this? What would you sell this data to me for? And I said, well, I don't know what you mean. He said, well, take this building. How much data does it produce? And I'll give you a price. He said, because that's what I'm really good at, is putting, numbers into data. That's my industry. He said, maybe that's your missing point, is that there's no tangible, currency going on. It costs you money to install all this stuff, but you don't know where to pass it on. You don't know what to do with it. If you, and I think there's some interesting lessons to be learned there is, what if we charge that young woman, $1 a day to use this building, and for her, she might think, well, that's nothing, because, I can use my stuff and $1's nothing. And, it kind of pays the way, because as soon as you don't have that, then I think you get your problem, which is I need to know who's using it, because that's my only way of building a business case to get the investment involved. And that's why Google and Amazon probably would be the wrong people. But the interesting industry, I think, that might be relevant is the telco industry. Yeah. Because the telco industry, are looking for their data is the new oil. And, you look, they're on the phones. They're on the phones. They know it's me. They know it's you. Do they care that I'm using it to book a meeting room? Probably not. Do they care that I'm using it to get my lunch? Probably not. They care that I'm using it only. And what they are masters of monetizing data. And so I think, I kind of often think about telcos and smart buildings as an interesting, because they've got to find their new forest. They've got to find their new marketplace, I suppose. And so not just connecting these things together, but actually being the sort of, I don't know, the marshal, probably the wrong phrase to use, but.
We're getting onto economics here, obviously one of your bags in your past. When you put a price on things and ask people to pay for it, you very quickly find out what's valuable and what's not, right?
Yeah,
because price is a signal.
Absolutely.
People don't like to hear this, but price is a signal. It balances supply and demand, and it sends you signals. You choose to ignore the signal. Most people do. But, if take the Edge in Amsterdam, right? I'd love to do like a post-facto analysis on that and see what worked and didn't work. Because I bet you half the stuff they put in just is merry sleds. Nothing's going on with it, right? But some of it will be working. The question for me is, what is the stuff that's really working, and what do you do with that, right? I'd love to know that. Someone, please do that. Send me your data, please.
Me too. Me too. I mean, I can remember going to a similar building where there was one department that you didn't have to use the app or the screens to book meeting rooms, and they were using Post-it notes. And literally, you just put on the note, I want the room from 9 till 10, and Robert would put his note, and and I sat there watching this, and I said, why are you guys different? Why are you guys not using all this stuff? And they said, this works.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was this going back to this good enough scenario.
Yeah.
And what it really came down to was trust. Nobody would move the Post-it notes, whereas the digital version, just was fraught with, like snags and, real challenges. So they hadn't ironed out those challenges. With the Post-it note version, trust was implicit just by the fact that if I put a post-it note on the wall that says Paul 9 to 10, no one would dare remove it.
Yeah.
Whereas if I went in and put it in the calendar, somebody would kind of knock on the door and try and circumvent me and tell me, Paul, could you move your meeting? But it was almost the fact that I put the post-it note, they trusted me and I trusted them. We weren't going to have a row. And I thought, when I walked around the rest of the building, I thought, oh my God, we're going the wrong way. We're stuffing more stuff in when really we just need more bloody post-it notes.
You've hit one of the issues with social media, right? The reason someone wouldn't take your post-it note off, because if they got caught doing that, the shame.
Absolutely.
Right. Whereas if you're online and no one can see who's rubbed off that meeting, bad behavior doesn't get punished, right?
You try to do that in a gym where you got a row of bikes or treadmills, and there's a board there, a whiteboard, right? Bike one, time in, time out, right? And there's like 20 bikes, right? Yeah. If anybody ever got erasing someone's name, tried to prioritize their time before the other guy, the gym just explodes. Like that's just an asshat move.
Yeah,
and everybody will let you know that.
Yeah, so a downside of digital is bad behavior is not called out, right?
No.
Right. One of my old friends used to say the problem out of it is no one's punched in the face enough, right? When you get young, passionate people screaming at people who are eating their dinner, they're doing that safe in the knowledge that old person's going to get up and smack them in the face, right? They would never go out and do that to a skinhead who's sitting there eating his burger. No.
Very true.
They're bullies, right? But they do it knowing they're not going to get a consequence for that bad behavior. So again, this is all these social engineering problems have to be ironed out for the smart building to work, right? So it's not a technology problem; it's a social ecology problem. It's a building and engineering problem. It's a people problem. It's a technology problem. All these things have to be mushed into an equation and resolved, right? And Absolutely. That's why they are bloody difficult to do. They sound great, and everyone goes, of course I want that. But wow, to pull that off is hard as hell.
Well, and I would just come back always to the framing. How might we make this building smart? Let's if you made that your first question, because the alternative is how do we make this building not smart? The opposite to that. And when you go through that process, you start to wheedle down towards your answer, because you get through to who are we looking at, who's the person, and then you get to the next question down, which is what if we tried something? That group of people, they wanted how do we make our workplace efficient? Maybe they didn't say smart. Who are the people involved in it? Us. What if we just use post-it notes? Now, and the wow is the fact that they don't have rows, they get on as a team, and they trust each other. And so what works is all of that. Now, how often when you take those 5 kind of step questions in a smart building context, do you get past the question, what works? Because rarely things don't work. Yeah, it's got wow, no unquestionable wow, staggeringly so. But as we saw during the pandemic, most technologies just couldn't pivot to accommodate people who've changed their space. And we got found out in lots of cases.
Yeah, that's when you find out what works and don't work. That's the cold analysis, right? What's being used and what's not being used, right? Very simple. I love them things where you see these aerial views of a town and then there's this green path and then you can see the shortcut people are taking through it, right? Yeah. That tells you that design looked great on paper, but in reality, people just went, no, that's not working for me, and just cut across, right?
Yeah, when you look at it, when you turn your mobile phone from a portrait to landscape, things change in direction. And how often when you do that, I mean, who is it? Someone told me a story about people flow. They were doing some analysis of people flow in a new railway station they were building, and they were trying to work out, in trying to work out whether they could get people through the station at sufficient levels that were safe, but also to justify the train timetable.
All right.
And as they were doing this exercise, they realized they couldn't. And the reason they couldn't was that the surrounding streets in the city and the way the traffic flowed and the way the bus timetables worked and everything else, they could not get people into the train station at the right level to justify. So they were going to, before they even start, trains were most likely to run underoccupied.
Wow.
And you think, oh my God, those trains are where you make your money.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and you think, wow, and now they're looking to fix something. But these things could have been thought about. What is the problem we're trying to change, and who are the people affected the most?
Question, right?
It's the person trying to get the bus. They're the person. What are you doing about them?
Okay, listen, we're coming up towards the end. We tend to just ask one quick fire question each.
Okay.
You want to go first, Robert, or shall I?
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so my question is, what should we be talking about that we're not talking about now in terms of smart buildings? What do you think is the thing we've got to really focus on?
I think it's probably just human behavior.
Yeah, behavioral.
It's using our undated knowledge of human behavior.
Yeah,
and really, really bringing that much, much closer as a skill set for people in the industry, and to get them to realize that maybe they do need some help.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would say definitely behavior. I don't think it's got anything to do with technology. I think that's further down the line. And it's human behavior against the confines of the governance and process and compliance that everyone has to operate in. But yeah, I would definitely say more behavioral scientists or more anthropology involvement in the process. They're there, they're around. It's just getting that understanding to bring them into an industry that's traditionally either think they know or don't believe they need to.
Yeah. So, Paul, my question is, let's just say you took 1,000 design professionals, architects, engineers, interior designers, property developers. They were forced to attend a program you were putting on, which was on human behavior, and you had to invite a human scientist, a behavioral scientist, a social scientist in as your guest speaker. Who would you pick and why?
Probably either Tricia Wang, who did some work with Nokia because of what she did around human behavior around mobile phones, and probably someone you may not have heard of, but someone called Susie Liu, who works for Netflix, who again, you use this human behavior research to understand why people used or didn't use, in her case, the humble receipt. Because she looked at the humble receipt, that horrible piece of paper we have to keep, and looked at how could we make that more interesting. And of course, she works for Netflix. So how they visualize data is everything Netflix do, right? Because that's what they do. But the fact they recruit people like her and Tricia Wang in the Nokia story, I think are examples of industries are trying to wrestle away from their own people sometimes and actually encouraging more diverse thought in areas that got nothing to do with their prime focus. But when they look outside and bring this learning in, it opens up doors. So probably those two. But if you're talking about someone famous, in the UK, it would be Dr. Hannah Fry, who's quite a well-known mathematician, who's a storyteller, I think, in the best way. And she tells stories through data. And I think also storytelling, you can sell anything if you've got a good story. You could probably sell a smart building if you've got a good story.
Tom Peters, again, this is again, going back a long, long time ago. Tom is one of those legends who has always been ahead of himself. But he talked about, and this is probably easily 25, 30 years ago, and he was on about stories. Your story is everything.
Yep.
He said in the future, your story will tell your journey, and being able to tell that story is huge. And I've always held on to that. And when I think about people that have good stories, and there's, whether it's success stories, and I think about companies, for example, in Europe, and one that comes to mind only because I have an intimate relationship had in the past was Danfoss, and Mats Clausen was the founder of Danfoss. But the family during World War II, they were from Denmark. But Denmark, of course, was occupied by Germany during that time. And the family had a farm, and the family, as to the best of their abilities, kept safe those Jewish farmers that they could as employees, so that they weren't touched by the German military. And then of course this went on when Mads grew up as a young boy, playing around with his brain and materials, and developed, I think it was a compressor or something. But anyways, he was up in his bedroom, and the thing that he built became so heavy that it actually collapsed, and this device fell onto the dining room table below, and it's the story of the company. I mean, the products are one thing, but it's the story of the company that always, for me, attracted my intellect to its history and its roots. And yeah, you're right. The story is everything.
Origin story, right? It matters. You remembered that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just to very quickly, there's the whole thing about story thinking. Yeah. So we talk about storytelling, and companies have chief storytellers. IBM have them, Microsoft have them. So have people dedicated to that. And I've often wondered about that because, do they assume that we all are able to tell stories? And it becomes implicit, the fact that you go and work for a company, you understand our story. We don't need to train you. You understand it. So go out and tell the story. And truthfully, we're just not that great. We'll bombard people with evidence, case studies, and all sorts of things. Yeah. But that genuine, from the heart storytelling, and the thing that probably is part of this whole behavioral thing is story thinking. And so a story thinker is someone who thinks about the audience, thinks about how they're going to receive the story, puts themselves in their shoes, and then realizes when they've done that, they don't need 100 pages of PowerPoint slides. They don't need an hour and a half YouTube video. They need something else. And they reframe to suit the audience. Yeah. And we just don't do that well. And so consequently, we just confuse the hell out of people, but they won't tell us because they don't know they're confused. Because they believe you because you're from Google or somewhere, and it just kind of spirals. So yeah, story thinking is probably an art that we should all develop more.
Yeah,
I like that. I love that. So let's wrap that up there. Listen, we will put out to everyone in the show notes all your connection points and links to your book. But thank you for coming on. That was a really interesting conversation. I'm super excited about the future of buildings and worried all at the same time. And I think we covered all that here. And your book is really interesting. So thank you for doing that as well.
Yeah, thank you guys for giving me the opportunity. I really enjoyed that chat. It's nice.
Yeah.
The Edifice Complex will continue in just a moment.
Are you struggling with paperwork, spreadsheet overload, and project management? Then Blue Rhythm is the solution to help you. Streamline your commissioning and project management process. Go paperless, increase efficiency, and save money. Blue Rhythm is commissioning and project management software by practitioners for practitioners, adapting to your workflows and processes, and doing things your way. Blue Rhythm provides painless and fast onboarding by bringing your existing workflows, forms, checklists, and issues logs into Blue Rhythm for you. You can use their pre-built templates to customize your commissioning workflows. And Blue Rhythm can fully handle the transition from your current software platform. Blue Rhythm is secure, scalable, and reliable, backed by amazing support, and accessible 24/7 on any Windows, iOS, or Android device. Why are you still using paper and hard-to-control spreadsheets? Start your free Blue Rhythm account today at bluerhythm.com.
Are we there yet? Yes, we are. The future promised real-time monitoring and control of our buildings, and now that is a reality with Sensor Suite. The only question you need to ask yourself is, how much energy and water is my building wasting each year? SensorSuite will do the rest. With SensorSuite solutions, any existing building and equipment can be retrofitted with smart sensors and controls that generate an industry-leading high-resolution data feed, unlocking a level of operational optimization and visibility across your entire building portfolio. This allows analysis and targeted interventions that turn old analog buildings into intelligent, energy-efficient grid resources, allowing monitoring and control at your fingertips through Apple, Android, and Windows devices. Make a difference to the environment and start saving money today. Go to sensorsuite.com or call toll-free 1-855-773-6767.
And now, back to the show.
A lot of our guests have been sort of property development, architects, engineers, that type of, and we haven't really had sort of someone looking at the social aspects, the human development side of it. I mean, Bill Browning was close to that and some other individuals. But what I like about Paul is he's a really diverse thinker.
Yes.
And he gets the psychology, he gets the human factor design, he understands the trajectory, if you will, of technology. Like, he has a grasp on it, and he made some really good comments. And I love the talk about layers of pace.
Yes,
that is so true. I mean, when he said that, layers of pace, I went everything from ants to bullet trains, to the movement of money, across the world, like hitting a button, and all of a sudden you've transferred billions of dollars in a second. Layers of pace. Being able to sit back and watch these layers all move that's a cool thought process.
And he's also talking about we've become autonomous sometimes, right? You get into a project and there's all these milestones. You're crashing towards each milestone, right? And when you're in that mode, it's really hard to stop and think and pace yourself and have an original thought, right? Because you're just hitting that deadline every time.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Like I said, when I was listening to him, I was thinking of Stephen Covey, and I think it was Stephen who said, "Seek first to understand, then to be understood."
Yes.
Which is communication, that's really important. And I got to think. I mean, if I think back on the times in my life that conflict, it was because I was trying to be understood rather than seek to understand.
Yeah, so conflict and rebellion is normally rooted in a lack of listening and hearing or being seen, right?
Yeah.
And that's why rebellions break out. You're not hearing me, you're not seeing me, right? That's the world we live in right now, frankly. And that operates at a personal level and a macro level. But the other thing I liked was he was talking about the word smart or green or climate change. They are just so inaccurate, unbounded words that to be completely useless. And I actually think that is one of the big issues we face because take climate change, it's such a macro thing. Is it an act of God if you're in that gang? It's so big to be overwhelming to make you think, oh, screw this, I can't do anything about this, right? Whereas if it was reframed as pollution, and, do you know how much stuff we chuck in the sea every day? Do you know how many rubbish tips went away? And green, right? What does that mean? So this is how you get greenwashing. Because green is such a horribly useful word. Yeah. You can just stick green on things and people go, oh, that's good. Oh, I like this building because it's green, right? What does it mean? Nothing. And then smart. It's the same problem. It's going to be like the greenwashing all over again. You're going to get smart washing or whatever that's bloody called.
Yeah, these buzzwords, I call them pixelated descriptors because there's so many of them now that they've become so small and so meaningless, that they're pixels on a screen. And people throw them out as if there's a gazillion of them and they've lost any impact. I mean, I hear people use, like you said, I hear the word smart and my eyes roll back.
Oh, yeah, it makes my eyes roll. I mean, he correctly called them out as useless words, right?
Yeah.
Which is what they are. But he also called it out as they're trying to cater to the lowest common denominator. But in doing that, you're not acknowledging the complexity, and you're making them useless. So your intention is to like put the concept out there and have people react to it in a good way. And all you've done is make people not react to it. It's a unintended consequence, right? And again, no one calls it out, right? I don't know. It's just weird. Someone at a political level has to be a grown up and say, you know what, the world's complex. You can't boil it down to a sentence or a word. And this is really what's going on. Right? Clarity is everything in this world. And, clarity is the enemy of bullshitters and obfuscators, right? But people don't want clarity, because when it's like, that meeting he was talking about where that young lady said, I wouldn't use that app. And there's a guy in that meeting who spent £1 million developing it. And he is going to, for all his life is worth, he's going to try and force her to use that goddamn thing, right? That's reality meeting what works and doesn't work, right? And that is the problem. And building designers suck at considering what the users want. I don't think I could probably count on one hand in 40 years I've had that conversation. What do you think it's going to be like for the users? I said nobody.
If we take it down, every once in a while, in the right crowd, if we're in a restaurant, I'll quiz the service staff. And it depends on who's with me at the dinner table. But let's just take, for example, if it's a bunch of manufacturers of boilers or heat pumps or whatever, right? And we'll ask, and typically it's a woman, but not always, but typically it's a woman. And we'll ask her, about her world. Do you rent a home? Do you buy your own home? Do you in a condo, whatever? And if they happen to live in a house, and it works really well if they've lived there a long time, and I'll say, well, what do you have in your house, a boiler or a furnace? And she'll say, well, we have a boiler, just as an example, right? And how long have you had that boiler? 20, 25 years. And do you know the name of that boiler? Haven't got a clue.
No.
Haven't got a clue. So then I said, well, have you ever lived on a farm? Never. Well, but you know about tractors? Yeah. Well, what's the most famous tractor brand that you know of? John Deere. Didn't even, no heartbeat, nothing. They could get the name of the tractor. They don't live on a farm. They never worked on a farm. They don't know anything about farming, but you can ask them about a brand name of a tractor. Boom, John Deere. Yeah. But they've been living with the boiler for 20, 25 years, and they don't even know what's in their basement.
That's a failure of marketing, right? And storytelling.
It is, right?
Yeah.
So this whole, the whole thing, Stephen Covey, seek to understanding who your client is, the people that are in the building, like what do they need? And are you imposing your own biases? We talked about biases in the interview. Are your biases actually getting in the way of your success?
Yeah, they are, absolutely. Yeah. And it's really hard to break out your comfort zone, right? We all want to live in that comfort zone. Yeah. So that was a really interesting interview for me, because I think the next frontier coming out of this recession we're just going into now, buildings are going to they're all going to try and push into the smart space. And there's going to be some huge wins and there's going to be some horrific fails. And it's going to be fascinating to watch this unfold. Again, keep going back to Steve Burrows, right? I'm almost sad I'm at the end of my career, because I'd love to see how this arc comes out. Fast forward 20 years, what is a smart building then? Does it work? Someone's going to crack that nut, I guess, right? I'd love to know what that looks like.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, when did we have Paul Ghezzi on? How long ago was that? He was one of our
3 or 4 years ago. He was onto that as well. Now he's doing well. He's the CEO of Control Energy or Control Inc. now, and they are really ramping up with the IoT stuff. But again, they're plowing the market of energy efficiency. So technology is an enabler of efficiency. Nothing wrong with that, but it's not going beyond that at the moment. And now Paul's a commercial beast and he's in the business of making money. The reason it's not going beyond that for him because there's no money in it. Yeah. Right. So there's money in enabling energy efficiency. So that's where the dollars are going, I guess. Right. Yeah.
I love the whole discussion about social ecology, the story thinking. That was good.
Thinking, I love that. I'm so stealing that.
Yeah, it was really good. I mean, like I said, I remember Tom Peters talking about it, and here we are still, 25, 30 years later, talking about your story thinking.
Yeah.
I love it. I really do.
And that other one about the the Netflix taking on these people who are just nothing to do with their business, just to get basically when they're hiring that lady, like what was her name, Susie Lou. They're basically saying, we're going to hire you, and you're going to show us something we just can't even see. You know what I mean? And that is awesome, right? I love that. That's creative, but it's also an acknowledgement that you don't know everything, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't happen in our business, does it?
No, it doesn't. My dream guest would be David Kelly from IDEO. We'll never get him on. He's so
he's too big. Yeah,
he's so out there, big, but he has a college now. I think it's at Harvard or Wharton, one of the big Ivy League business schools that is on industrial design and human factor design, that kind of stuff. And if there was ever a guy that understood what it takes to make products for people, it was his philosophies, and we've talked about this before, that again, going back to Covey and Paul and but seeking to understand. And when they developed the mouse, because IDEO worked with Steve Jobs when Steve was trying to develop an interface, the human interface to the computer, and the mouse came to be. And David Kelly was a friend of Steve at the time. And the same thing when the iPhone. There's a great, for our listeners, if you can find it online, 60 Minutes interviewed David Kelly, and he was talking about his early day relationship with Steve Jobs. And Steve actually went to him with some of the very first prototypes of the iPhone. He actually dropped it off to him. So, can you imagine Steve Jobs showing up to your doorstep? Hey, David, here's our new iPhone.
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah. So David turns it on and it doesn't work. So, of course, David and Steve have a chat about that.
Yeah.
But, when they do design, and again, I've said this before, and I'll say it probably to the day I die. Architects and engineers and property developers, they really need to get out of their brains and bring people from all walks of life that are going to be using that space, that development.
Yeah.
We talked in an earlier presentation about the space between the buildings.
Yes.
Adam, I haven't stopped thinking about it, because really what draws people to not just the downtown core, but just developments, is the ability to engage with nature, people, random chance encounters with whatever, or the people to be able to escape the buildings that they're in. I need to get out. I need some fresh air.
This is the French concept of flaneuring, the flaneur. Now, you murdered that because I'm an Englishman, right? So, but the concept is this: I just go and walk, and I find things happen. I see things happen. I engage with people, but you got to have that realm to walk through, right?
Yeah.
The space between buildings is part of that flaneuring experience. I leave the office for a half an hour walk, and it could be great. It could be awesome. I might see some nice public art. I might sit in a nice space, right? But that space needs to be there.
Yeah. Well, and so it's it. So I just had a thought, and thinking about Paul's book, even if it's free, which again is an awesome title.
Great title, man.
It's a great title, right? But the space between the buildings, even if it's free, if it sucks and it's free, people won't go to it. But people do go to places, they'll pay to go to places where it's fantastic. But if it's fantastic and it's free, then you have social interactions, and you have dialogue, and you have stories, and you have creativity, and that's actually, when you think about the common languages around the world, like, if you actually removed religion and politics from the world as we know it, taking that from a line of Bare Naked Ladies, what we have in common is food and music and art. These are common cultural things that bring people together. And when you can make that available to them through the space between the buildings,
That's a great book title, by the way, Space Between the Buildings. I think you should take that and run with it.
Yeah, it's just awesome. It really struck with me. And again, with Paul and his book, and even if it's free, and that's a great story that he had, right? Where the guy said, all this fancy crap, even if it's free, I ain't taking it.
Listen, that guy who was supposed to sign that and didn't sign it and said that, what a baller move. Just
no kidding, I love it.
Microsoft, I don't get it. Just drop that mic. Yeah, exactly. That was such a baller power Game of Thrones move that guy did.
Yeah, but what Paul did was what everybody should do. Like if you're thinking about it, and you get that rejection, your brain shouldn't go into depression or rejection or whatever. It's
why?
Okay. Why?
Yeah. Why? Why did that happen? That's what you got to take away out of that. Yeah. That was good. I really enjoyed that.
You've been listening to the Edifice Complex podcast with Adam Muggleton and Robert Bean. To access show notes for this episode, visit edificecomplexpodcast.com. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on iTunes. See you next time.